Alright, before I get into making conductive ink that has texture in it and show you how to test your conductive paint, no matter if you're making any kind of formula, whatever, I'll show you how to use an ohm meter, an inexpensive one from Harbor Freight. But let me kind of show you the evolution of texture. Alright, so for example, when you first start out with electroforming, you're probably going to get this workflow a lot. This is the ring shank with small dendrites growing on it. And customers love these dendrites. They are amazing. They are just like, oh my god, I've never seen anything like it. And you know, it's great to watch them, you know, light up, because it is nature. It is growing around the crystal. It is a fractal design that's happening here, and it's great to see nature be able to grab a hold of that crystal like that with those little dendrites. So you might get work that looks like this, and then it has no gap filler between the stone. Okay, so a big tip would be make sure there is a gap filler here, because this could catch it at a really bad angle and pop off. This is some of my older work. This is probably like 5 or 6 years old, and these are just demonstration pieces. I show clients to say, well, this is the evolution of things. So, good stuff. Still got texture though, right? The imbalanced tank, which is great. So this is probably one of my tanks went south, had very little chloride in it and very little leveling agent. And you get this. These, when you make them, they are really hard to whittle down because the inside of the shank gets as much texture as the outside. So they are amazing rings, but you have to really polish them down. It does take a while. You'll go through maybe a twisted wire phase, which is amazing. So if you twist wire and then pound it with a hammer, anywhere you pounded it, the texture will grow a little differently there because you broke the surface. So anytime you break that surface, so if you use copper that looks like this, it'll grow amazing texture on top of that because the surface is already broken. Copper like this, it's already broken. Cool. Especially if you have a perfectly balanced tank. And I know a lot of people that are into electroforming, they have these amazingly balanced tanks, and now they can't get texture. That was their number one thing I always get. It's like, how do you get that texture? So, for example, this is a hybrid. It has low texture here, high texture here. This is what it would come out right from the tank. This is what I add in this area to get texture. So that's what we're going to be making today, is a conductive paint that promotes texture growth like that and like that. You notice it's not rough. In fact, it's coming right out of the tank like this. I can just throw it right into the patina. Cool. So now that I've introduced texture and what it looks like with the paint, let's begin on how to make this stuff. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need is one of these. These are really nice containers. They're from Pyrex. And whenever I'm making conductive paint, I would say the best thing you can have is not a screw top. So this is, fits right over the top of it like that, and it goes down there. So this is a really amazing container when it comes down to conductive paint, especially texture conductive paint, because you can see around the edges here what will happen is this will get into your threads that would be your seal for the jar. So you can't use your standard ball jar for this. You would have to have something a little bit like this, a storage container that is vacuum sealed. Okay, so you're going to need one of these in order for this to work out. Okay, so that's the first thing you're going to need. The next thing you're going to need is graphite powder. Doesn't matter if it's generals. If you're unsure, you can go to my website, firstdensitymaterial.com. That's firstdensitymaterial.com, and I have an Amazon list of mini graphite paints or graphite powders that work. So just go ahead and use one of those. Those have been tested. Okay, some of the texture is this. This is very fine crystals. If you are into tumbling, and if you squash your own crystals with a hammer just to get some usable material for tumbling, you always have this stuff left behind. Now if you don't have that, if you don't feel like squashing rocks and crystals, you can also use frit, glass frit. Okay, I'll show you that. So this is just tons and tons and tons of really, really small texture. This stuff is amazing though. It's all random. That's what I like about it. Alright, so glass frit is this, and it comes in different medias or different sizes. This is a medium. So my wife's into glass, and she has all kinds of this stuff laying around. And I used to steal it, but now I like the crystal a little bit better because it's more random. But there's that. Different colors, but it doesn't matter the color because it all gets covered over with the paint. Alright, so the other thing is sand. Now for sand you can use this classic colored sand by Sandtastic, that's what I use, or you can use silica sand, and silica sand is what you use on sandblasting media. You can also use rock tumbling silica, that silica carbide, that works out really good. So anything in that nature. This is cheap. I have a ton of it, so I just ended up using that. But if you want different grits, again, carbide and silica works out really good, and you can get that in your rock tumbling store near you. So. You're also going to need some distilled water and a popsicle stick. Okay, so I only have a little bit of Mod Podge left over, so I'm only going to make a teeny tiny batch of this stuff. It's the same formula if you use it to make 5 gallons or 3 ounces or whatever. It's 50-50, so 50% Mod Podge to 50% graphite, and then water to thin it. So I have this much Mod Podge, I need that much graphite. Now you cannot screw this formula up. There has been many many people that say they have screwed this up. I do not know how you could ever screw it up. It's just so forgiving. If in doubt, you're better off just adding a little bit more graphite. When you add water, it's just a little bit of water. Like, I want to say a half a teaspoon, just enough to make it so it's easy to stir. And there's so many variations of this that you can make. In other words, if I added more water, I would preserve details in the piece. If I didn't hardly add any water, it would have more of a gap filling capability. So when I add texture to it, I'm going to add some of this crystal. And I'm going to find that sand that I put down on this very, very clean table. Start stirring this stuff in. And what I'm going to do is show you how to test this stuff, just so you can put yourself to peace on it. Put your mind at peace. Now, is that texturized enough? I don't know. But what you do is you find yourself either a piece of plexiglass or glass. Glass is preferred. Why glass? Because it's an insulator. It doesn't conduct any electricity whatsoever. And it allows me to see how thin this is. Velocity, the viscosity of it. And the opaqueness tell me a lot about the liquid. Okay, so far I do like the texture. I would probably add a little bit more rocks to it, but what I'm going to do is let this dry on the glass, and I'll just make a few swipes here, like something like I would do very thin, a globby version of it, and maybe like just really thin. Notice I can't see through any of those. Let these dry fully, and then I'll show you how to test them with a multimeter. Alright, so let's run through how to test this using a digital multimeter. Fact, you do not have to be a scientific genius or anything to run a multimeter. They are the easiest thing to manage. You just have to understand what it's measuring. Okay? So, we are going to be measuring ohms. The higher the ohms, the worse it gets, if that makes sense. So, what we want is probably ohms within this range. 200 ohms is good, and I'll put it in perspective for you. Like copper, pure copper, would be probably right about here. And then as we go up, maybe water with a little salt. Okay? So the more conductive would be down here. That would be copper. And as we move this across, we get less and less conductivity. Cool. So I'm going to start out with 200 ohms. And I'll see this little symbol, it says ohms. Then I look for ohms over here. A lot of these multimeters have it so you can plug these in. It might be plugged in here. What it needs to be is plugged into this port right here where it says ohms. I think this is a $9 multimeter, and it's probably my favorite. I have a $200 one, and I use my $9 one more than anything else. Don't know why, but it does rock. Okay, so I'm going to place these down at about 1/4 of an inch. With my right hand, and with my left hand I'm just going to adjust my multimeter. Okay, nothing. Nothing. Cool. So this is 24K of resistance. How do I know that? Because it says 200K and it's reading 25. So that'd be 25K of resistance. Awesome. In all actuality, that's pretty good. It's not that bad. So when making conductive paint, the thing you have to think about is two things. How well it sticks and how well it conducts. Okay? So if I want a paint that is really hard to scrape off this glass, I would just leave it the way it is. This will be conductive. It might be a little slower, but it will work. And adhesion is awesome because the adhesion properties, you want them to be high because it is adhesion to the crystal after all before it actually grows the dendrites around. So you don't want to screw that up too much. If it gets too less of adhesion, you'll have maybe problematic things later on in your workflow. So the way you test that is just make sure you're doing it on glass and make sure you're doing a scrape test on it. If I wanted to add more graphite, it would make the copper grow faster, but you would lose adhesion. So that's why I'm saying there's so many different formulas that you can make just with this Mod Podge and graphite that it's ridiculous. Millions of different combinations. You can play around with the formula. It doesn't have to be 50-50-50-50 is where to start. If I wanted to preserve detail on the piece, I would add more water to this one. But since it's textured, I'm going to leave it alone. I think it's pretty good the way it is. Alright, cool. If in doubt, add more graphite. Then do a test. That's how you use a multimeter. Okay, so before I go, I just want to promote a little bit of creativity. For example, you might live in different countries that doesn't have Mod Podge available to you. And I'll give you a little hint. It doesn't require Mod Podge. Any glue will work, just about. So for example, hide glue works. I've even made a conductive paint using polyurethane before. Okay. India ink works. So don't forget you have the test. You know the way to test it, what you're looking for. That means you now have the ability to span out into your area, find different stuff, test. Amazing, right? Yeah. I like that. It's like I want you to be as creative as possible when it comes down to it. There is no one answer for this stuff. So, I hope you enjoyed the video, and have fun.